Book 3, Chapter 84. Continuing with verse 43. Otherwise, the mind is like an infant who views the appearance of the world in its unconscious sleep of ignorance. But awakened by consciousness, chit, it sees the transcendent form of the self or soul without the mist of delusion. This delusion is caused by the part of the mind that is aware of physical senses, and it is removed by the reasoning faculties of consciousness. Hear now, Rama, what I am going to say about how the soul is to be seen in this world of phenomena that is the cause of misleading the mind from its knowledge of the unity to the false notion of the duality. What I will say by opposite similes, right reasoning, graceful style, and good sense of the words in which they shall be conveyed to you, cannot fail to come into your heart. By listening, your heart will be filled with a delight that will pervade your senses like the oil upon the water. Speech which is without suitable comparisons and graceful phraseology, which is inaudible or clamorous, or has inappropriate words and harsh sounding letters, cannot take possession of the heart. It is thrown away for nothing. Like butter poured upon the burnt ashes of an offering that has no power to rekindle the flame. Whatever stories there are in any language on earth, and whatever compositions are adored with measured sentences and graceful diction, all these are rendered acutely insightful through conspicuous comparisons. As the world is enlightened by cooling moonbeam. Therefore, almost every verse in this work is embellished with a suitable comparison. So Vasishtha reveals his strategy for conveying the knowledge of the divine karmic traces and beyond in these verses. He wants to appeal to the heart. So we've talked about how the mind is like an infant. So the mind is innocent. When the mind is awakened by consciousness, then it sees the form of the self or soul without the mist of delusion. So what is the mind that's being talked about here? Well, the mind is the collection of individual karmic traces. It is the ego, false sense of self. So if that's the mind, then what is the heart? The heart is the higher level of consciousness. It is not the mind, it is beyond the mind. So beyond the mind, we have the silent witness. And so the heart is the silent witness beyond the mind. But recall, as we are dealing with the silent witness, it is in stages, degrees of the silent witness. It is not supreme silent witness. Supreme silent witness, unconditioned, pure silent witness, that is Shiva. And then silent witness is conditioned. It's still silent witness, it's still consciousness, but it's not completely pure. It has some conditioned part. That's the silent witness that we find in our conscious, beyond our conscious thinking mind, here in our human physiology. That is a conditioned silent witness. And that aspect of the silent witness we call the heart. And so he wants to appeal to that level, the silent witness, which is the heart. Conditioned silent witness. And why? Because what is the silent witness conditioned with? Conditioned by individual karmic traces, forming a mist or a shield or a covering over pure silent witness. And by taking these expressions to the level of the heart, which is beyond the mind, first level of the heart would be in the pranamaya kosha. And then when the mind transcends and becomes the subconscious mind, then the silent witness moves up and becomes the heart, centered in the manomaya kosha. And it just moves that way in pairs. The final pair being Krishna and Shiva. Krishna equating with the mind, Shiva equating with the heart. So if we direct all of this perfect speech into the heart, then it will balance any karmic traces that it comes into contact with, and that will spontaneously allow transcendence to a deeper level. Chapter 85. Brahma describes his own experience asked the sun. Vashishta continued, I will relate to you, Ram, agreeably to your request, the story that Brahma himself told me of old. The mind, the manas, produced Manu, the progeny of the mind, who beget the Manujas, otherwise called men, Manavas or Manushas, the offspring of the mind. Once before I had asked the lotus-born God to tell me how these hosts of creation had come to being. Then Brahma, the great progenitor of men, granted my request and related the story of the 10 Aindava moon-like brothers in his loud voice. Brahma said, all this visible world is the manifestation of the divine mind. Like circling whirlpools and rippling swirls of water on the surface of the sea, hear me tell you how I, the personified mind, first awoke on the day of creation in a former kalpa with my volition to create or expand myself. Previously, I remained alone, quietly intent on the creation at the end of the prior day, kalpa. I had compressed the whole of creation in the focus of my mind and hid it under the gloom of the primeval night. At the end of the chaotic night, I awoke, like from a deep sleep, and performed my morning prayers, as it is the general law of all living beings. I opened my eyes with a view to create and fix my look on the emptiness all about me. As far as I could see, it was empty space, covered by darkness, with no light of heaven. It was unlimitedly extensive, all void and without any boundary. Being then determined to bring forth creation, and with the acuteness of my understanding, I began to discern the world in its simple, ideal form within me. Then I saw my mind, the great cosmos of creation, set unobstructed and apart from me in the wide, extended field of emptiness. Then the rays of my reflection stretched out over them from amidst the lotus cell of my abode and set in the form of 10 lotus-born Brahmas over the 10 worlds of his creation, like so many swans brooding upon their eggs. Then these separate orbs, cosmic eggs, brought forth multitudes of beings to light within their transparent aqueous atmospheres. Thence sprang the great rivers and the roaring seas and oceans. And thence again rose the burning lights and blowing winds of the sky. The gods began to play in the ethereal air. Men moved about on the earth. And demons and serpents were confined in their homes under the ground. The wheel of time turned with the revolution of seasons and their produce, and adorned the earth with her various productions by change of the seasons. Laws were fixed for all things on all sides, and human actions were regulated in the Smriti scriptures as right or wrong, and producing the reward of heaven or the torments of hell as their fruits. All beings pursue their enjoyments and liberty, and the more they strive for their desired objects, the better they thrive in them. In this way, the 7 worlds and continents, the 7 oceans and the 7 boundary mountains were brought to existence. And they continue to exist until their final dissolution at the end of a kalpa period. The primeval darkness from the face of open lands fled before the light and took its refuge in mountain caves and hollow caves. It abides in some places allied with light, as in the shady and sunny forests, lands, and lawns. The blue sky, like a lake of lotuses, is haunted by fragments of dark clouds resembling swarms of black bees on high. The stars that twinkle in it are like the yellow filaments of flowers, shaken by the winds. The huge heaps of snow setting in the valleys of high hills resemble the lofty cottonwood trees, beset by their pods of cotton. The earth is surrounded by the polar mountains, serving as her girdles, and the circles of polar seas serve as her sounding anklets and trinkets. She is covered by the polar darkness, as if by a blue garment, and studded all about with gems, growing and glowing in the bosoms of her rich and ample mines and sea. The earth, covered by the ornaments of her greenness of vegetation, resembles a lady sitting dressed in her robes, having the produce of rice for her food and the busy buzz of the world for her music. The sky appears like a bride veiled under black covering of night, with glittering chains of stars for her jewels. Seasonal fruits and flowers hanging in the air resemble wreaths of lotuses about her body. The orbs of worlds appear like beautiful pomegranate fruits, containing all their peoples in them, like the shining seeds in the cells of those fruits. Bright moonbeams, stretching both above and below and all around the three sides, appear like the white sacred thread, girding the world above and below and all about. Or like the Ganges River, running in three directions in the upper, lower, and nether worlds. The clouds dispensing on all sides with their glittering lightning appear like the leaves and flowers of airborne forests, blown away by the breezes on all sides. But all these worlds with their lands and seas, their skies and all their contents, are in reality as unreal as visionary dreams and as elusive as the enchanted city of the fairyland. The gods, demons, men and serpents, seen in multitudes in all worlds, are like bodies of buzzing gnats fluttering about fig trees. Here, time is moving on with its train of moments and minutes, his ages, yugas, and kalpas, in expectation of the unforeseen destruction of all things. Having seen all these things in my pure, enlightened understanding, I was quite confounded to think from where all these things could have come into being. Why is it that I do not see all that I perceive with my visual organs, like a magic scene spread out in the sphere of my mind? Having looked into these for a long time with my steadfast attention, I called to the brightest sun of these luminous spheres and addressed him, saying, "Approach me, O God of gods, luminous sun. I welcome you to me." Having approached, I said, "Tell me what you are and how this world with all its bright orbs came to being. If you know anything of this, please reveal it to me." Being addressed thus, he looked upon me, and then having recognized me, he made his salutation and uttered his graceful words in speech. The sun replied, "O Lord, you are the eternal cause of these false phenomena. How is it that you did not know it and ask me about its cause? But should you, all knowing as you are, take delight in hearing my speech, I will tell you of my unasked and unthought of production, which I beg you to listen to. O great Spirit, this world is composed of reality and unreality in its twofold view. It beguiles understanding to take it sometimes for a real and at others for an unreal thing. It is the great mind of the divine soul that is employed in these constant and unceasingly endless creations for its diversion. Chapter 86. The son's story of Indus and his wife's tapas, and their 10 sons, the Indavas. The son continued. It was, my lord, only the other day of one of your previous kalpas, and at the foot of a mountain, beside the tableland of Mount Kailash, that stands in a corner of the continent of Asia, that there lived a man named Suvarnajata, together with all his sons and their progeny, who had made that place a beautiful and pleasant home. Among them lived a Brahman named Indu, a descendant of the patriarch Kashyapa, who was a saintly soul, virtuous and acquainted with divine knowledge. He resided in his house with all his relatives and passed his time agreeably in company with his wife, who was as dear to his heart as if his second self. But this virtuous couple had no children, as no grass grows in sterile soil, and the wife remained discontent at the unfruitfulness of her blossoming or seed. With all the purity and simplicity of their hearts, and the beauty and gracefulness of their persons and manners, they were as useless to the earth as the fair and straight stem of the pure rice plant without its stalk of grains. The unhappy couple left for the mountain in order to make their tapas for the blessing of children. They ascended to Mount Kailash, which lacked any shade from shade trees, and was uninhabited by living beings. They stood fixed on one side like a couple of trees in a barren desert. They remained in their austere tapas, subsisting upon liquid food, which also supported the trees. At the close of the day, and from the hollow of their palms, they drank only a sip of water from a neighboring cascade. They remained standing and unmoved. as immovable trees, and continued long in that posture, in the manner of an erect wood in heat and cold. In this manner, they passed 2 ages before their meditation met with the approval of the God who bears the crescent of the moon on his forehead, Shiva. The God with the cooling moonbeams on his forehead advanced toward the parched pair, like when the moon casts her dewy light on trees and lotuses, dried and scorched under the burning sunbeams of a summer day. The God appeared to them, mounted on his milk-white bull, and grasping the fair Uma, goddess Parvati, on his side, and holding the beaming moon on his head, like spring seasons approaches green shrubs, strewing flowers upon them. The couple's faces and eyes brightened as they saw the God, just like lotuses hail the appearance of the beautiful moon. They bowed down to the God of the silvery crescent and snow-white face. Then the God, rising to their views, like the full moon and appearing in the middle of the heaven and earth, spoke smilingly to them in a gentle and audible voice. The breath of that voice refreshed them, like the breath of spring revives the faded plants of a forest. Shiva said, I am pleased with your meditation, O Brahman. Offer your prayer to me and have your desire reward granted to you immediately. Now let's take a look at this for a moment and see what's transpired. Here we have a pair, a couple, husband and wife, standing motionless for long periods of time. They're in their meditation. And only after being motionless for a very long period of time does Shiva arrive, pleased with their meditation. What does that mean? Well, this is revealing the practice that we must engage in if we're to experience the full value of the silent witness. It is basically the practice of being motionless, not moving. We can apply this to our meditation. If we sit in a lotus posture, or even in a comfortable sit-up posture. But we sit motionless, not moving. Then what will happen, always, ultimately, is we will become the silent witness. It is parallel to the practice of putting the body to sleep and keeping the mind awake. This is a practice that we can do for lucid dreaming. And when we put our attention on our body to go to sleep, we find that periodically, maybe even constantly, there is the urge to move. There is this feeling of, I have an itch here, I'm not comfortable there, I have to move this, I have to straighten this. We have these constant needs to move. Where does this need to move arise? It can only arise from karmic traces. And it is the karmic traces that are disturbing our ability to connect totally and become the silent witness. So if we adopt the practice in our meditation of settling into a position, a meditation posture, not lounging in a chair, but being in a direct, attentive meditation posture. And then we do not move. We remain totally still. And we become aware of incredible sensations. They're very distracting. And when we have these distracting sensations, we're reminded they're only distracting because I'm not established in the silent witness. So we take that as a cue to allow ourselves to find the silence, observe the silence, become the silence. And we do that again and again, and that is our total focus. Every time we're distracted by some itch or some need to make some movement, we come back to that practice of becoming, being the silent witness. And by doing that, at some point, when we least expect it, because if we're expecting to be the silent witness, we're just creating a boundary, creating some barrier to being a silent witness. But we can't even be expecting, we have to be like the innocent child, expecting nothing. Just performing that practice of being perfectly motionless and still. Keeping the body in that motionless and still state causes ultimately the mind to go into a motionless and still state. And then we realize I am the silent witness. And from that perspective, all the needs of the body to move and scratch the itch or think a thought is very trivial. And at that point, we have achieved Samadi. Samadi is when we are the silent witness. And at that point, we can think a sutra and it will respond. Consciousness will respond with the manifestation of that sutra. And that's exactly what's going on here. Shiva said, I'm pleased with your meditation. That means the individual has achieved Samadhi. And now, from that state of Samadhi, one can drop a sutra into the pure consciousness and let it go. And then it will manifest. And that's exactly what happened. The Brahman replied, O Lord of gods, please favor me with 10 intelligent male children. Let these be born to dispel all my sorrows. The son continued. The god said, be it so, and then disappeared into the air. His great body passed through the ethereal path with a tremendous roar of thunder like the surge of the sea. So now we're in the period of Sanyama, in which we are again in Samadhi. And that's when the result of the sutra will arise. Verse 18. Then the Brahmin couple returned to their home with gladness in their hearts. They appeared like the reflection of the two gods, Shiva and Uma. After returning, the Brahmin became big with child from the blessing she received from her god Shiva. In her pregnant state, she looked like a thick cloud, heavy with rainwater. In proper time, she brought forth a boy as beautiful as the digit of the new moon. In this way, she bore 10 sons in succession, each as handsome as the tender sprouts of plants. They grew up in strength and stature and were invested with the sacramental.